and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the Blue Marble Desktop webinar. Currently, all participants are in listen-only mode. And at this time, you should be able to see our Blue Marble version 2.4 on your screen. If you need assistance or have connectivity issues during the presentation, please send an email to feedback@bluemarblegeo.com. Our support team will reply to you promptly. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the questions tool at the right of the GoToWebinar screen to submit questions to our panelists. We will field them as we go and address more at the end of the presentation. Any questions we cannot address during the session will be followed up by email. You can always email our support team at geohelp@bluemarblegeo.com. Today's demonstration is about 60 minutes in duration. Welcome, everybody. Today we will review the different troubleshooting errors that users may face during their everyday use of the Blue Marble desktop. From general application errors to data conversion issues, in this webinar we will answer your questions on how to troubleshoot the desktop. The Blue Marble desktop can be a very powerful tool, but even the most advanced users can be tripped up by everyday errors. As always, there will be time at the end of the demonstration for questions if you have a particular error you would like addressed. Also, if you'd like in-depth training of these tools, please contact your Blue Marble sales rep at sales@bluemarblegeo.com. The Blue Marble team will be on the road again and offering training in the coming weeks. Our next stop is Amsterdam, the week of April 23rd. Public Applied Geodesy training courses will be offered, and we'll be attending the Geospatial World Forum. Following that week, the team is back in Houston for April 30th in conjunction with the Esri GIS conference, Petroleum GIS conference. On-site sessions for your organization are available for all the dates and locations mentioned. If you'd like more information, please give a call to your Blue Marble sales rep at sales@bluemarblegeo.com. All of these dates and locations can be found on our website. With that said, I'd like to introduce Sam Knight, our Director of Product Management. Good morning, Sam.
Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. So like Danielle was talking about, today we're going to be taking a look at some troubleshooting techniques for the Blue Marble desktop. And we're going to be looking at the new version 2.4 of the Blue Marble desktop, which did just release a couple of weeks ago now. So we're going to take a slightly updated look at some things we've taken a look at before in some of our previous troubleshooting webinars. So we are going to be breaking a lot of things today. There's going to be a lot of error messages popping up, but that's actually the entire point of this webinar. I've done my best to put us together a workspace that really can do almost nothing because everything I've done in it has a problem. So bear with me if something goes a little bit unexpectedly because I've done a whole lot of things wrong in today's workflow. So to get starting here, I'm actually going to start by starting up the Blue Marble desktop to show us one of our very common application errors. So when we start up the desktop here, you're going to notice that I get this error right off the bat. This is one of our #1 tech support questions. The settings file does not contain a valid signature. Please contact your network administrator to obtain a signed settings file. This is going to be an error that folks working with new installations, specifically in a network environment, are going to bump into every once in a while. What this is indicating is that the settings file, and there's one particular file called settings.xml that's a part of the installation. This file contains a lot of the security features built into the Blue Marble desktop. And if that file does not have a valid signature, this is a digitally signed file, so that means there is an encrypted signature that describes the file embedded in it. If that file does not have a valid signature, it's going to fail the security check and you're going to be kicked out of the application. So right now, if I just say, okay, my settings file is not valid, it's actually going to boot me right back out of the application, back to my desktop here. So to take a look at that, a lot of users bump into this and you end up having to go back to your either your network team or your IT team, whatever you've got in-house, to navigate past that. So we're going to take a look in the Blue Marble desktop, what we call our settings directory in here. So in this directory, you'll see there's a whole collection of files, and these are all the nuts and bolts of how the application works. These are where we store things like your user preferences, your workspaces, your projects, your custom coordinate systems, all that kind of stuff is stored in this particular location. So if you take a look at the path up at the top of the application, this is going to be the location where we're going to find it on Windows 7 and Vista machines, and there's a slightly different path for XP. Now the settings file itself is this little file down here called settings.xml. That installs with the application. There is a stock version of that. For those of you on single user machines, this is not a file you're going to need to worry about. This only relates to those folks with network work groups and admin settings related to those shared work group settings. So on my desktop here, I have a signed version of that, and this file is actually mentioned in the documentation for setting up a network license. So one of the steps in the network licensing setup procedure is to copy this file into this directory where you find that base version of it. The application simply will not work in a network mode without that. It provides a lot of the teeth of the security features to block folks from doing things they're not supposed to be doing according to the administrators of your system. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just simply going to rename this one. And I'm just going to call this unsigned. A lot of you will simply be deleting that file or just overwriting it. So I've taken that one out of the mix, and I'm going to copy my signed settings file into that directory. So I've effectively replaced it with a version that's very similar to it. It just contains that signature. Now when I start up the Blue Marble desktop, I'm not going to get that error about the signed settings file. So it's going to load my workspace right up, and it's going to bring me back to my license manager tool, which is a familiar tool for a lot of folks here. So we're going to start up the Blue Marble desktop. As the software loads, we're going to see all of our familiar tools coming back to us. And in this particular workspace, I've got a whole lot of different jobs loaded up here. We'll see some of these jobs down the side of the screen here. And particularly down at the bottom, we're going to take a look at some of these jobs that I've added to my workspace here that are going to cause some problems for us. So I've got a whole project that I've simply called Trouble. And this is where we're going to start off taking a look at some things with actual job type work. Before we jump into the actual jobs, I want to take care of just a couple of other sort of general installation type things and setup of the application itself. There are a few things, again, for those folks working in network license environments. We're going to take a look down under the license manager here. We're going to find that under the file menu. But first, I'm going to take a look down here under the options and the data source menus. A lot of folks are going to see that these menus are entirely grayed out. You're not going to have access to the admin settings, and you're not going to have access to the data source menu. Those are both going to be grayed out. In particular workflows like this, we're going to want to take a look under your license manager. And again, this is for those folks who are working in a network license environment. When we start this up, you're going to see that we haven't necessarily checked out a license. It just simply means we're connected actually to the license, but we haven't pulled the license down locally for us to work with. There's this setting beneath each of the various types of license that we have to always check out a license from the server on startup. If we start it up, it simply pays attention to the fact that the license server is there. But it allows you to navigate through your workspaces, take a look at stuff without actually pulling that license down. We've got the checkout button if you want to simply manually check out that license, and it will tell you whether or not it has received a license. So this means I'm now active. My license is checked out, and I can actually go down under the data source menu, under the options menu, and we'll see that you're then going to be able to access some of those parts of the menus that might be grayed out. If we want to set that so as soon as I start up the desktop, it just automatically pulls the license, lets me go to work. On that license manager screen, it's going to start up by default By default there, you can see you can turn that off, so some of you may not see it. By default, you can simply choose to always check out those licenses as soon as you start up the application, and that's going to give you instant access without competing with other users in your network group for those seats if you're in an environment where you're bouncing back and forth between who's using the software at a given time. So that's going to let you go right into your sort of administrative functions as soon as you start up, and you'll notice that a lot of those menus stop being grayed out. So I'm going to say OK to that. Now under our data source menu and under our options menu, we've got instant access to all of those admin type functions as soon as we start up the application. In my case, those were already enabled because I've been messing around with this workspace a lot, and I'd already pulled my license in between going back and forth of the startup session there. So there's going to be just one slight difference for you. You might see those grayed out, and you're going to want to take a look at that license manager to make sure that you've got that instant access. That is a step that is, again, covered in some of the license documentation for setting up network licenses. And sometimes there's a little disconnect between the folks who do your installations of your software and yourself as you actually come in as a user to get your work done. So you'll want to check those settings out if you're on a network environment. So to actually get down to doing some work in the desktop, you'll see we have all of our usual demo jobs in here. I have a simple coordinate transformation set up on an interactive job here to go from one coordinate system to another. I would normally expect to enter my data in here, choose my coordinate system for input and output, and in this case, I need a datum transformation. So I've got this datum of NAD27 on the left-hand side for my input, and I've got my WGS84 here on the output. So I need to pick a datum transformation in the center box of the screen there. I just simply double-click that to bring up our datum transformation selection dialog. And this is going to be a familiar dialog for anybody who's used to working with the Blue Marble desktop here. The datum transformation is chosen independently of the datums themselves to help us get the most accurate transformation in here. So it's very simple. We have the filtering tools that a lot of folks are comfortable working with now based on the geography of the points. So I entered in my coordinate, I told it what coordinate system we're working in, and it's going to filter that list down for me to a particular transformation. If I open the parameters of that, we can see exactly where this thing comes from. We have some lookup codes to look it up in places like the EPSG database online. We can take a look at the definition, what type of grid shift is going to be done, or mathematical transformation parameters, all of the nuts and bolts of that datum transformation. So sometimes the helper tools can get tricked or fooled simply by some very simple user mistakes. If you're trying to work quickly, you may put a setting out of place and you don't get this far. It's not going to find a datum transformation for you. So in this case, it found one for me. It's the one I expect. It's our NADCON transformation for here in the continental US, and there's nothing stopping me from finishing off my transformation. So today we're mostly going to be looking at where things go wrong, and it's not quite so simple. So first we're going to take a look at some of those kind of careless errors. If you're trying to work a little fast to maybe verify somebody else's conversion or something like that, there are a lot of places where we can make very simple mistakes. So I'm going to start out here on a job I've called direction, and I've given the names of these are all custom names that I've punched in for the type of mistakes that we've made on some of these jobs here. So on this particular job, I've got the same conversion as we just looked at. So going from NAD27 to WGS84, and I've actually got that same exact coordinate here. So I'm going to go ahead and try and pick my datum transformation. And we're going to get an error message. And this is a very, very common error message that folks bump into for a number of different reasons. And we're going to take a look at a few reasons why. So the message is that no datum transformation is found relating the input system to the output system. And it's going to give you a warning here that if you process any data without applying this transformation, you're going to have incorrect results, basically. So that's incorrect results are either going to be no result is going to be possible, or it's going to be even worse, a bad result that will put you in the wrong place on the planet, So no datum transformation found. Okay, so highlights your datum transformation, reminds you that nothing has been found. If you try and force that, some users do have an option, depending on the administrative controls, to go ahead and do a transformation with no datum transformation in there. That occasionally does have a valid geodetic purpose. 99 times out of 100, that is not going to be valid. So we do want to go ahead here and find a valid transformation. So first we need to figure out what we've done. The basic places to start looking here are your coordinates. So we've entered in our starting coordinate. We want to convert that out to WGS84. We've picked NAD 27 on the right left-hand side here. So that's a common datum. It covers all of North America. One thing we can do here is we can pull up the information on that coordinate system and take a look at the envelope, where on the planet that happens to be used. So here, if we actually open up the envelope parameters, it's going to give us the bounding area for that particular system. So in this case, we can easily see that my latitude and my longitude fall within the area of use for that system. So maybe there should be a transformation here available to me. So it's probably not our coordinate system selection here. On the output side, I have WGS84 selected. If we open up the envelope of that system, we'll see that it is a world system, so it applies everywhere. So I'm within the envelopes of my coordinate systems, and so really there's only just a couple of more things that we can take a look at. One is going to be our formatting. So if we take a look at the angle formatting that we've punched up in there, I've entered this as decimal degrees. We're going to take a look at our formats, and here I've entered in that my input is actually decimal degrees. So our formatting looks okay. That's going to be something we're going to come back to in a minute with another example here. And then really the only other setting that we can take a look at is the direction. So there's this direction toggle at the bottom of the screen, and in this case, this is what's tripping us up. This is simply a toggle switch. Every time I click that, you'll see the directional arrows change direction there. The red arrows are going to be pointing in the direction of the conversion. So when I started out here, my arrows are pointing actually to the left instead of to the right. And so with my arrows pointing to the left, you'll see I have this placeholder of 00 entered for my WGS84 coordinates waiting to be overwritten by my output of this conversion. In this case, it thinks that the 00 placeholders over there are my input coordinates because I'm going from right to left instead of the other way around. So what I need to do here is just simply toggle my directions back the other way, and let's try that datum transformation again. And there we go. Up pops our datum transformation. We can move on and finish off that calculation. So this directional toggle, something to always keep a quick eye on if you're getting that error message. It's one of the simplest places that folks are going to be getting tripped up here on the interactive job. As well, that directional toggle gets real important as we're talking about forward and inverse calculations, because that directional toggle does choose where your starting coordinate is for those traverse plots in a forward and inverse, where we're talking about a starting point and an ending point for the distance along a traverse across the surface. So that's our directional toggle. We want to keep an eye on that. Always very simple thing to fix. You just toggle it so that it's pointing the correct direction for your conversion, and we go ahead and move right on. So I've got another job over here. Very similar conversion here. Same coordinate systems. We're going to see that coordinate a few times here. And again, we're going to try that conversion. We're going to see that same thing, can't find a datum transformation for my points, so what's gone wrong this time? So we just took a look at the directional toggle. I am actually going, in this case, from left to right, so it's not my directional toggle. My coordinate systems, again, those are the same coordinate systems with the same coordinates, so I would expect to be able to get something back. But in this case, another very, very common error. And this is just something you're going to bump into as you maybe work a little too quickly trying to get something done fast, is you simply enter the coordinates in the wrong order. So in this case, I've stuck my latitude in my longitude field and vice versa. So in this case, I was meaning to enter 44 degrees of latitude and 70 degrees west longitude down here. So what that actually does is it moves my position. So I'm no longer in the same spot on the Earth. And if we come back to the information about my input system here, so if I pull up the info for NAD27 and I take a look at the envelope definition here for where NAD27 is useful, if I'm trying to look for a datum transformation that's covering 70 degrees south, that's actually going to fall outside of the area where I have a valid transformation. And so even though I've got my coordinate systems appropriately entered, the data that I'm feeding in falls outside that area, and so those transformations are not going to be found for the region. Because in this case, I'm basically looking at somewhere on the other side of the planet, really, from where I'm intending to be doing my conversion. So what we need to do there is just simply copy out our coordinates and get them into the right fields there. Once we have those flipped around, again, we can very quickly find our transformation and move on. So those are like the two biggest places where folks get tripped up, is just simply swapping the latitude and longitude. The same thing happens with the northings and eastings if you're working with projected coordinates. Very, very common errors there. And you can actually bump into those types of errors both here on the interactive job and as well over on the point database job, where we're talking about actual columns of data that we're going to be converting. So the first things we always take a look at if we're running into a problem with not finding a datum transformation, or simply if your numbers aren't coming out quite right, is that you've actually entered them in the appropriate order on the screen. You want to verify where on the planet those coordinate systems are covering. So you want to simply validate the fact that your northings and eastings fall into those expected locations. And then also those datum transformations, we simply want to make sure that you're trying to find a transformation in an area where a transformation exists. That's one of those last pieces. There are a very few datums in the database here where we have a datum definition, but there is actually simply no transformation available for that. And that's usually through lack of historical documentation for certain places on the planet. Just this morning we found another one in Taiwan, a very old Taiwan datum. The datum exists and it's commonly used in mapping systems, but unfortunately through history no good parameters have been published for those models. So those are the things we're going to want to eliminate from possibility to make sure that we are actually looking in the right part of the world to find those transformations. Next, I'm going to take a look at a little more tricky problem, and we're going to take a look at some custom entries here. So I have a particular coordinate system set up here, the Australian geodetic datum of 1984. So I'm going to be doing a transformation here from AGD84 to GDA94, and that's the geodetic datum of Australia for 1994. And that's a fairly common sort of a WGS84 modern equivalent there for output, the GDA94 system. Now, my first job here, I'm actually using as a control. So I have a particular transformation that's already been selected for that area. I have two control coordinates that are relative to each coordinate system. So I have the AGD84 coordinate, point roughly in the middle of Australia, and I have a output coordinate in GDA94 getting from one of those to another. And let's just say, for sake of argument, that I'm testing a conversion for a new coordinate system that I'm trying to enter. So let's say this conversion came from some other software. I'm simply trying to match it. So I have a particular system here. We're going to open that up, and we're going to take a look at the parameters for that datum transformation. So we can see I've got a full EPSG definition for this system, and let's just say that I'm trying to validate a conversion that was done in another software package. So I have a 7-parameter rotation here applied to the coordinate frame rotation, that is, applied to these two datums. So I can go from AGD84 to GDA94 using this 7-parameter transformation. And in the transformation parameters, we can see all of the nuts and bolts of that. So let's expand that. We can make it a little larger and get it all on one screen. So we can see the parameters down in there. And what we're going to be working on is a custom datum transformation for the similar area. So we're trying to match this transformation that's somebody else has done using these same parameters in here. So I'm going to close out of there, and we'll see I've entered in a custom transformation. So let's say I'm simply trying to match this transformation from some other software package, and I'm entering this in as a new datum. I'm going to right-click on that just the same, and I'm going to view its parameters. You can see we've entered in all of our identifying information. On the definition, we've entered in the same parameters down here. So we have all those same shift values, all of our shifts, our scale, and our rotations for that 7-parameter datum transformation in there. And all looks good. So let's go ahead and select that transformation. I'm actually going to move over to another job where I have this set up so that we can grab onto that and then compare the two jobs. So I'm going to pick my custom transformation in there. You'll see it's blue, and it does not have the padlock because this is a new definition. I've actually manually defined this in the database here. So that's how it's going to look if you're entering your own datum transformation. So I'm going to select that transformation. I'll finish off that calculation, and you'll see I get my output result there. So I have my output coordinates here. We could print out our various report options under the printer icon up top there if we wanted to take that offline for comparison. But let's just simply toggle back and forth here. So I've got my output on the custom side. Take a look at those values, particularly the end values there. My latitude ends with 55.74, and my longitude ends with 3.80 seconds, respectively. I'm going to click back to my control coordinate, and you'll see I'm not in the same place here. So we've got a slightly different output result, but in general we are actually pretty close. But a lot of folks working in geodetic, close isn't good enough. If we can't get an exact match as we're theoretically matching these transformations, something has probably gone wrong in your workflow. Either the control data is simply bad, and that is possible. Usually fairly rare. Control data is often very, very precise for what you would expect, but something's gone wrong in here. So what we need to do is take a look at that custom datum transformation. So down under the data source menu, we can take a look at the datum transformation definitions. So this is where we actually go to define those transformations. I could browse down under geographically where we've placed those systems. I could simply go down under the all listing and find my custom definitions that way. So there's my custom definition, and I actually copied this one to begin with. So let's say I'm trying to translate these parameters in from some other software. I'm going to view its information again. It's going to let me take a read-only view at it. So we can see all those parameters. I'm pretty sure those parameters match. We were pretty careful as we copied those over. Let's take particularly close attention to the exact method here. So we have a 7-parameter transformation, and it says coordinate frame rotation in parentheses after that. For this particular example, this is another very, very common place where folks go wrong. So coordinate frame rotation, let's compare that to the custom parameters that I just entered. So I've taken that transformation, that's the control system, from some other software package, and I've tried to enter it in my own here. And let's take a look at that. So all the same shift parameters down there, with the exception of the method. It is a 7-parameter method, but you'll notice instead of being a coordinate frame rotation, it's a position vector rotation. So a fairly subtle difference there for folks who aren't familiar with 7-parameter transformation techniques. These are two completely, not entirely different. They do have the same ideas, but there's one key difference here. The rotations that are involved are equal and opposite between those two methods. So if you're trying to copy a transformation from a particular software package or a particular database source, you're going to want to make sure when working with those 7-parameter shifts that you've got the right rotation sense, because they are simply equal and opposite. In this case, I've entered my parameters all with exactly the same directions and values, and all I need to do there is change my method over to coordinate frame rotation so that we're actually rotating in the right direction. I'm going to OK that system, save that into my database, and now when we actually go back to mimic that transformation, let me go back over to my custom job here for comparison. We're going to go in, grab that system that we just modified. We go ahead and finish our calculation, and we can see those control values are now what we're expecting. And all that is because of the rotation sense. So as we're working with custom datum transformations, there are a few places like that where we can very easily go wrong. So in this case, we were taking a look at a custom transformation, and it was simply related to the method. We had a class of a 7-parameter coordinate frame versus position vector rotation. That's a really common place. A lot of mistakes are made. Other very simple mistakes in here, if we want to take a look at that definition, are in the source and the target of the datums that are selected. Just as easily, a lot of folks get these control sheets, and the control sheet will say that you've got a transformation going from WGS84 to some other datum. And most folks think about those in terms of entering them in software the other direction around. So they're going to go from your local datum to a more global model, like WGS84 or GDA94 in this case. And when we do that, that's also going to throw off the directions of all of those shifts and all of the rotations if you have those rotation values for your transformations. Any type of transformation, we need to make sure that the source and the target are being entered in the correct order for the shift values that you've got. Otherwise, you're simply going to be going the wrong direction, and you're going to end up someplace else other than where you started and where you intend to finish up with your transformation. So those are sort of the two big hot errors that folks make when they're working with those custom transformations. Is first the exact method, you've got to match that method, and then the direction of which way you're going. So either from the starting datum to the end, or the other way around. So we just need to make sure that those are taken care of pretty well for us. So those are some places we can run into simple errors here on the interactive job. And that's mostly where we're going to be using things like our simple control coordinates for making sure that we've got something set up before we get into stuff that's a little more hardcore. From there, those same errors can all actually populate as we get into some more complicated types of jobs, such as the point database conversions. Those datum transformation errors can happen anywhere. Those can happen in any job that we're changing the datums in our system here. So those errors that we've looked at so far, those can all happen in any of these jobs, and you've got to keep an eye out for them. Again, some of the more specific ones will happen on particular jobs, such as the point database job. Here we are talking about numerical data, and so there is more room for formatting issues, bad entries on particular rows of a database, things that are more likely to happen in tabular data formats than things like vector data files or raster data files for simple internal storage problems. So I have a what we call a PDC job here, a point database conversion set up. This is a simple spreadsheet. I've got some longitudes, some latitudes, and I have some output coordinates in here already. Let's go ahead and clear those output columns, and we can recalculate these to see what's going to happen. So on our input data, we have longitude, we have latitude, and in this case, I've got some WGS84 coordinates. So these are WGS84 lat long on the input. And for my output system, I have a UTM projected value, and I've got some columns set up for that. We can take a look at our column settings to make sure that we're getting the data from the right place. And first, one of the very common errors folks run into here is just simply making sure these columns are set to the appropriate thing. It's very simple for folks to toggle the wrong one here. So to set your longitude as your latitude and vice versa, that's probably the most common error that happens in the point database job. I'm going to skip that since it's a little bit mundane. I've set my columns up correctly here. I'm going to place my northing value in a column called Y and my easting in a column called X for output. So with those conversions in place, I'm going to go ahead and just simply fire off this conversion. I don't need a datum transformation because we are using the same source and target datum. So I'm just going to go ahead and try and calculate that out. So this is, again, a very common type of error we're going to run into on the point database conversion, where there's what's called a coordinate data format error. It tells you exactly where the problem is, so that's a good starting point here. In tabular data formats, it can run into all sorts of issues like missing rows, just simple blank rows. If this is data that somebody has hand-entered, there can be very simple typo type errors errors that you're going to run into, but we try and do our best to tell you exactly where the first place we run into that error is. So you do have the option to continue. We can say you've got a problem with this particular cell. Do you want to keep going anyway? I'm just going to say no on this because I want to make sure that I'm doing this all right. Down in the process manager, since it is working with a whole file down here, it's going to give us a status on that job we've just run. So this one's going to go red and indicate that we canceled it. So the error mentioned row 5. And in row 5, it said that I had a bad longitude value. So what I'm going to do here is take a look in my table. And we can come down to row 5 in my longitude cell there. And we can see that it looks like I do actually have a simple data entry problem. So I have my longitude value. All of the rest of the values in here are degrees, minutes, and seconds for formatting. But it looks like I've simply missed a space between my minutes and my seconds for this particular value. Now, if you're loading this in from an input data file, such as an Excel sheet or something, you may want to go back and actually edit that outside of the desktop and re-enter it. You might want to just give it a quick once-over. In this case, we've loaded the data in. I could simply edit it right here, so I'm just going to place my cursor and add that space back in. And you'll see it's indicating a little pencil icon next to my row number to show that I've edited that cell. Then we can go back to our conversion, and I'm simply going to try calculating that again. And so this time the calculation is going to make it down to row 5, and it's going to keep right on going. So the rest of my table didn't have any problems. You'll see down in the progress bar that job that I've called bad row. So over here in the project manager, I've titled that job bad row. That's what it shows up as in my process manager. It's finished with a green status indicating everything's good, and I can then go on and actually save that out as a persistent file. So that's where I've got just simply one bad row in the file. Sometimes it's going to get a little more complex than that. So here I've got a bad degree format set in my job. So this is going to be a much larger issue. So this particular job, for anybody who hasn't yet taken a look at the Blue Marble Desktop version 2.4, this is our new release. It's only out a few weeks now. There's a new job in here called the seismic survey conversion job. And this is a job that's been streamlined to handle specifically SegP1 files, UCOA files, SPS, shell process system files, and in a little more streamlined manner. We can actually do multiple conversions in here. For those of you familiar with these are seismic data formats, and they contain sometimes both latitudes and longitudes and eastings and northings. So those types of conversions, we can actually convert both of those at once now. That's why the interface looks a little bit different. If you would like a more in-depth look at this, we actually have a recording of a webinar we did, I believe it was last month, on seismic survey conversions. It might have been the month before that. It's posted on the webinars page on our website. You can actually view that webinar, the recorded version of that in its entirety. You can take a look in-depth at this new job. But in this case, I've got this set up to do a simple conversion. I'm going to take my latitude and longitude columns here for my shot point, and I'm going to calculate my eastings and northings. So I'm going to fill in those UTM values. I have this job set up. I'm just going to get rid of my process manager here so I have a little more room on screen. I've named an output file for this conversion, and I'm going to go ahead and take a preview of the conversion to make sure everything has been done properly. So again, here we've got this sort of familiar pop-up. Error conversion in row 1, the latitude entered is not between positive 90 and negative 90 degrees. So that is one of our base restrictions on our coordinates in here. So again, it asks me if I want to continue. So if I say, yes, let's try and continue, I'm going to get that same conversion on the conversion error, that is, for my second coordinate, because I've got more than just one bad data point in here. So what I need to do is sort of check this out on a larger level to see what I've done wrong. I can choose to simply apply my choice to all subsequent conversions, and I could try and convert this entire file. In this case, it's going to error out on every row because I do have a bigger error going on here. So I'm going to say no, let's not continue to that, and it's going to return me back out to my job. Again, the process manager indicates that I've stopped and there's been a problem with this job. So On the interface here, we've got our coordinates set up, WGS84 coordinates for input. I'm going to be converting that out to UTM zone 38 for output. That looks like a pretty compatible conversion. There's no problem here with my datum transformation. It did very specifically tell us that the coordinates weren't in the right range. So I need to check out the coordinates that I've got entered here for lat and long. So we'll take a look at the latitude column, and I've got what's very typical for our seismic data formats. I've got what's called packed DMS formatting. So there's no spacing, there's no decimal places in there. You just simply have to know where to look in that string of numbers to get the appropriate values out. So in this case, I've got packed DMS, and that's a fairly problematic format for a lot of folks. We want to make sure that we've got that appropriately set. So over on the input side, you'll see the degree formatting button down there. We're going to go ahead and give that a click. And it looks like I'm set to my default degree formatting for this rather than packed DMS. So for my left-hand format, my input side, I do need to just simply update and choose packed DMS as my input. If I go ahead and apply that, I can try my preview again, and it's going to run down those columns, making sure that all the values are now being read. And if I want, this looks like my preview has been successful. I could actually go ahead and process the entire file, writing that back out to the file location that I've specified. So in point database, probably our two main errors that folks are bumping into is either simply that you pick the wrong columns for input and you just plain don't have the right values in there, so maybe a swap of a latitude and longitude or northing and an easting, or because we've got so many numeric coordinates in there, the formatting for how those are being interpreted. So those are our very common errors here on the PDC job. I've got another one here that can show up again anywhere. So I'm going to come back to a interactive job here, and here we're going to be taking a look at a simple three-dimensional conversion. So I have a WGS84 coordinate specified for input. I have a latitude, a longitude, and now I've got a height specified because I've turned on my ellipsoid height for this conversion. And let's say I want to convert that out to one of the EGM 2008 models, so Earth Geopotential Model of 2008. That's a vertical datum based on a geoid model that actually covers the entire planet. So over on my output side, I need to turn on that vertical reference so I can see the conversion for the output. So I'm going to double-click on my vertical box out here, and I'm going to click on the world systems so that I can see the various vertical reference models that we have in place. And we're going to see that some of these are showing up in red, and they've got a little exclamation icon displayed along with them. A lot of folks are going to bump into this when you install the software for the first time. What these are indicating is that that particular definition is not usable at the moment because you need some more data. So if you try to select one of these, let's say I'm looking to go for the highly precise 2008 model that's based on the 1-minute grid. If I try and select that model, we'll see that I can't click on the OK button. It's completely grayed out. It's not available for use. So there's some problem with this. And if we pop that open to view its parameters, we can get into the definition of, in this case, the height model, which is the base geoid for that. The definition is that it relies on a very particular grid file. So there are a lot of transformations and vertical reference in here, both horizontally and vertically, that do require supplemental files to be installed with your Blue Marble desktop. So the fact that it's showing up in red doesn't mean you've done something wrong, and it doesn't mean that there's a problem with any input that you've punched in. It just simply means that you need to download some additional grids to be able to use that definition. So in this case, you'll see there's this file that the height model is trying to get access to called EGM2008_1.dat. That's simply a copy of the grid necessary for that vertical reference. When we see that it's highlighted in red there, that simply indicates that that file doesn't exist. So again, with part of your installation here, there's a particular location where the application is going to be expecting to find some vertical reference data. And in this particular folder where it's looking for those vertical grids, you're going to see possibly some entries in here and possibly a whole lot of them, possibly none, depending on how many of these you've actually downloaded for use. So in this case, we'll see I've got EGM 2008_25. That's the grid for the other one I'm seeing in there. That's the grid for the 2.5-minute model. So I can actually select that and go back to my job for output. But if I really need that 1-minute grid, or if I need any of those other models that are showing up in red, I'm actually going to need to go to our website and download those. So I have a browser down here. This is the Blue Marble Geographics website. From our main site here, you'll see if you simply go to bluemarblegeo.com, there's a download setting, and we can look for some application tools and all of the supplemental pieces that go with those. So if we choose a geographic calculator or a desktop, we're going to be taken to the particular downloads page for those applications. So you can download the particular apps, the Blue Marble desktop in this case, and then any of the supporting files. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen there's a very long list of additional files that you can put in place with your desktop. A lot of these are going to be vertical files. Some of these are horizontal files, such as the Alberta Township Systems, the 4.1 shift files. They have varying sizes, and they cover various parts of the Earth, but there are a lot of supplemental downloads that you can install for the Blue Marble desktop. These are all free downloads. If you've registered on our website, you have full access to any of these grids. They download as executable installers, and what they do is they simply copy in the necessary grid files into the folder they need to be in. So if we simply copy in some of those new grids, all of the supplemental vertical models and the horizontal datum transformations, the other thing you're going to see these red systems on, those are all going to turn black. The exclamation icon will go away, and you'll then be able to use those for conversion. So that takes care of any of the red data source objects that we have. There are a number of other places things can go wrong. I'm going to take a look at just one more thing that some folks are going to bump into occasionally on the point database conversion job. What I'm going to do here is start up a new point database conversion job. You'll see that new job goes right to the bottom. And I'm going to select some data in there. And let me just grab a file here real quick. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to open up this particular CSV file that I have. I'm going to simply go ahead and load that file in, and we're going to get this error here. And this isn't so much as an error, but it's simply warning you that you've tried to load in a lot of data into the point database job. We don't have any built-in limits on what you can do in the point database job. What we do have limits on are going to be hardware dependent. So we've installed sort of a speed bump in the operation here. If you try to load in more than a set threshold of data, in this case we're seeing more than 10,000 records, what we're going to do is cut off the load of that and just ask you a simple question here. Do you really want to try and fully load this data set for viewing and editing in the point database conversion job? So this isn't so much an error that there's a problem with your data, it's just simply a warning. If you know that the file you've got is of a size that you can fully load in there, you can say, yeah, let's just go ahead and continue loading that file. You can also choose at this point to just simply preview the file, and it's going to only partially load in the data. You will then go on to fully convert that file if you want, but what it's going to do is simply cut you off and prevent you from overflowing the amount of memory you have available for display of these things. So this isn't so much of a problem when you bump into this, but a lot of folks have questions about what's actually going on here. So what's going to happen is when I click OK on the preview of that, instead of fully loading that file, I've got a simple seismic file here. Instead of fully loading that file that actually has thousands of records in it, I've chosen to only load those first 50. We can set up a conversion on this just like we normally would. You'll see the output data field is going to appear at the bottom, allowing you to do the full conversion of the entire contents of the file, but simply working with a lighter subset of the data at the beginning. So again, that's not so much of an actual error as just a warning that a lot of folks assume is an error when you're working with those data sets. That threshold is controllable. You can change that around to suit the threshold that you want to load data in underneath. Some folks will set that at 100,000. Some folks will set it at much smaller levels depending on the hardware available on your computer. So the default is 100,000 at this point. So if you load anything in that's real big, it's going to cut you off at that point and just ask you to clarify what you want to do with it. So that's one of the last common issues we're going to take a look at here. And now let's take a look at some of the questions that have come in. So if you bear with me just a second here, pulling up my questions tool to see if any have come in. Also, if you have not yet asked a question and you would like to, feel free to use that questions tool at the right of your screen, and we can take a look at any of your users' questions. Let's see here. First question coming in is, if I export a workspace that needs a custom coordinate system, what happens? So we were working with, in this case, we took a look at that AGD84 conversion, and that's a particular datum transformation that we have put in place over here as a custom system. So if we're taking a look at that conversion, remember I entered that in there. If I want to share that with another user, I can go to the File menu and I can export my workspace. So that workspace is now going to be calling a custom datum transformation. And that custom datum transformation right now is only going to exist on my particular installation. If I also want to share that custom transformation, you do need to export that separately. That's not actually stored in the workspace itself. That's going to be stored in the data source, the custom data source for the desktop. So down under data source, to pump that out, what you're going to do is you're going to go down to the export objects from XML. The XML data source here is what that's talking about, rather export. I had import highlighted. So you're going to want to go down to export objects to XML. This is going to bring up a dialog for selecting anything you want to move from one system to another. In this case, we're going to take a look down under datum transformations. And in the datum transformations, again, we can just simply browse back to that custom transformation. We can select it by double-clicking, and that's going to be added to our export list. If you have other objects that you want to individually export, you can simply go back and select those as well. And then once you've built up your list of snippets to share with another user, you simply click OK, and it's going to ask you where you'd like to save those. I can call these Sam's systems if I want to share those with someone else. And that's simply going to save me a little XSP file that your other user can import also under the data source menu. They're just going to go down to import objects from XML. Those definitions will then be added to their coordinate parameter database, and they can go ahead and use your job or your workspace depending on what you are sharing with them. Alongside of that, you could simply share your custom data file with them. So again, down under the data source, if we take a look at the dialogues where we work with those custom definitions, you'll see the custom transformation that I entered. At the top of the screen, you've got the two databases where all your parameters are stored. The GData.ml file, that's the master data source, and then the custom data file where anything that you enter is going to be stored. You could simply navigate to that location, copy the entire custom XML file, and share that with your other user. Some folks will put those on shared network locations, and they can be shared that way. So there are a number of ways to export or share those custom parameters. So if you've gotten any errors about sharing workspaces, simply missing transformations or custom systems, it is probably simply that you need to share out the custom definitions as well. I think that is going to do it. Looks like it's a quiet group this morning. If we have any other questions, feel free to submit those by email after the fact. We are going to be wrapping it up here. So again, if you want to take a look at upcoming webinar sessions, we do have a webinars page on our website now where we list off upcoming sessions. We are going to be taking a break for the month of April. We'll be starting our monthly webinar sessions again in May and monthly going forward from that. So keep an eye on the webinars page there. We do also now have an archive of past webinars that we've done. We have begun recording them for the last few months. The webinars are available for streaming view right on our website, so you can watch the past sessions in their entirety. And beyond that, I think that's going to wrap it up for the day. So if any folks are interested in upcoming webinars or upcoming trainings, again, please feel free to have a look at our website where we publish all that information. And thank you all very much for attending today, or to those of you watching later on the recorded version, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.